There have been complaints from time to time from BYU basketball fans about the lack of international prospects playing for the BYU men's basketball program. Since the day that Kevin Young was hired as BYU men's basketball coach, rumors have circulated he was going to add to his coaching staff via the overseas market, as well as fill out his playing roster with some international players. And two visits from two very highly skilled big men indicate BYU absolutely is a player when it comes to international athletes.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and we are your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is here for you to find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And BYU men's basketball is continuing to fill out Kevin Young's first roster as BYU men's basketball coach. He's also working fervently to fill out his coaching staff, and I'm assuming that news will be coming on both fronts in the relatively near future. Now, relative meaning we still have 6 months till the season tips off, I should say. It's not football, it's basketball. But I would expect that BYU will be able to fill out as much as they can as soon as possible, and indications of that are that BYU is continuing to do a lot of work in the transfer portal. Now, let's also acknowledge the elephant in the room. Yesterday, speaking of May 12th, was the final day for BYU men's basketball players to be able to enter the NCAA transfer portal. A lot of you saying, whoa, Jake, the transfer portal already closed. No, as a result of Mark Pope leaving the BYU men's basketball program, the portal windows extended further for BYU men's basketball, and there's been a lot of conjecture out there about the status of Noah Waterman. Could he have left BYU at this point? He absolutely could have. Could he stick around at BYU? Yes, he absolutely could have. But as of recording of this podcast, I'm recording this on Sunday evening. Happy Mother's Day, by the way, to all out there, all the mother figures in the world. But nonetheless, indications as of now are that Noah Waterman is not out of the BYU men's basketball program. Do I expect him to enter the NCAA transfer portal? Frankly, I do. It's just my expectation. I'm not basing that on anything other than me having a feeling that he is going to look elsewhere for his final season of collegiate eligibility or whatever is next for him in basketball. That opens up another roster slot for BYU if he does move on, and BYU is trying to backfill, obviously, with as many talented players as they possibly can get. Robbie McCombs from Vancouver the Foe has reported that there's two high-level European prospects who are expected to visit BYU early this week. The first has already been here stateside for one season. That is UCLA freshman. He'll be a sophomore this coming year. Berke Buyuktuncel. Oh, man, I'm just butchering that name. Berke Buyuktuncel is a very, very talented forward from UCLA. Now, his freshman campaign did not go according to plan. Dealt with a number of injuries for the UCLA Bruins. But when he was healthy on the court, you can tell this is a kid that's got talent. As Robbie and others, you can go look at it. He is projected to be taken in the 2025 NBA draft. Currently slated as a second-round pick. But at 6'9", with the playmaking ability, in addition to his three-point shooting ability and the fact that, once again, he is 6'9". You want to see tall, long, rangy athletes to play in the NBA. Berke, that's what I'm going to go with going forward here, looks the part. BYU be very happy to bring him in. Now, Robbie's also saying it's come down to BYU and Nebraska. Nothing against Lincoln, but BYU is far more picturesque, and hopefully Berke decides that Provo is where he wants to be. If you were to ask me a like-for-like replacement, so Noah Waterman exiting as the four-man for BYU last year, you're able to replace him with a guy like Berke, I'm not going to lie. It's a major upgrade, in my opinion. And I know that sounds crazy considering Noah is an upperclassman. Berke, as mentioned, dealt with injuries last year, but Berke's skill level is head and shoulders above Noah Waterman's at this point. Noah Waterman is a very, very fine basketball player. I'm being very clear about that. He's been a guy that for a long stretch of his time in Provo very much was a fish out of water, but he settled in and really bought into the program. And I thought he was a very, very capable player. But if you can essentially replace him with a guy of Berke's magnitude, his skill set, what he brings to the table, you're upgrading the 4 spot. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I think BYU would do well if they can get Berke to come to Provo to add him to that roster. I think he'd be penciled in day one, in my opinion, as a starting 4-man for BYU, alongside whether that is Fousseyni Traore or Keba Keita. Those are probably your 2 5-men at this time. And then that brings us to the other prospect that's visiting BYU this week, and that is Maxim Logue. And hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. As you can tell, I am not your typical French speaker, but Maxim Logue, 6'9", 18-year-old French player, is just an incredible athlete. Just Google Maxim Logue. It's Maximlogue. Look at the highlights of this kid. He is a human pogo sticks. 6'9", like I said, he's not the 7-footer that you aspire to have for BYU at the 5 spot, but his athleticism is absolutely special. He's a developmental guy, it looks like. He's more of a guy who's going to attack at the rim, but similar to a Keba Keita type, he is a rim-rolling big who understands that his job is to get to the rim, whether that's to block shots on defense or to rocket on somebody's head on offense, and you can do a lot with that. Obviously, you'd be bringing him along as he goes along in his playing career, but a guy like Logue is a very, very nice third 5-man if BYU can land him. According to Robbie, he visited Creighton recently, and Creighton's obviously one of those programs out there that's apparently got a ton of money NIL-wise. Could Logue be one of the guys that they bring in? TBD, but I think BYU would do well. And if you ask me, okay, what are the chances they pull off one or maybe both of these guys? I'd say it's the relative percentage of getting both of them is low, but if they can land one of them, give me Berke every day. But the nice part is both of these players indicate to me that BYU is absolutely going to be a player on the international market. I can remember in years past, way back to the Dave Rose era, throughout the Mark Pope era, there were BYU fans who were like, why in the world is BYU not leaning into the international market for it? Now, Mark Pope did lean in the international market, but did it more by going to Africa in terms of bringing in guys like Fousseyni Traore, Atiki Aliatiki, who are natives of Africa. But there have been some out there who have wondered, why isn't BYU tapping into Europe more often? Well, according to what Kevin Young's done so far, he is absolutely tapping into that market. Now, with his connections in the NBA and how global the NBA has become, I'm sure he's got friends, confidants, scouts, etc., who are working in the European circles, scouting-wise, and just watching these games, EuroLeague, for lack of a better term, that he can lean into and say, okay, these guys may not be NBA guys right now and ready to come over, but who could come in and play at the college level and have me help develop them along their route to the NBA potential. And that's what a guy like Maxim Logue, he absolutely looks that part of that. It's a guy that Kevin Young could bring in, say, okay, I've got a bona fide traits as a talent evaluator and developer during my time in the NBA. I know you aspire to play at that level. Let's work on it together and get you there at some point down the road. I think a guy like Berke would absolutely be benefited by having BYU's coaching staff led by Kevin Young helping him out. So I'm appreciative that Kevin Young is tapping in to the global market. Basketball is an international sport. You don't need to look any further than what St. Mary's and Gonzaga were doing during BYU's run in the West Coast Conference. And I remember there were a lot of people out there saying, why can't BYU go get some of the guys that St. Mary's and Gonzaga have got? There's got to be somebody overseas who's a member of the church who knows somebody that could get into these kids' ear. I'm sure there was, but for whatever reason, Dave Rose and Mark Pope weren't necessarily as in tune to this. It's absolutely a feather in the cap of Kevin Young that already early on in his coaching run at BYU, he's tapping into this market because, like I said, it's an international game. There are players literally worldwide who would love nothing more than to come get a top-notch education in college in the United States of America, but at the same time, be coached up and trained by one of the premier talent evaluator and developers of the in the NBA in the recent past. It's what Kevin Young's reputation is. He brings in guys, he works with them, he's a straight shooter, but he gets the most out of the guys he coaches up, and that is absolutely a piece that BYU needs to recruit to, and hopefully they can get one or two of these guys that they're bringing in recently to fill out this roster. You can only start where you can start, and that is getting one of these guys in there, and hopefully they go out there and show what they're capable of, and that yields more and more exposure on the international market for BYU to go out there and recruit. A lot of it is finding the right people that you need to know, whether it's agents, like I said, scouts, coaches, whatever it is, especially when it comes to European markets. You got to get in with the right people, and I think Kevin Young's got absolutely the connections to do that. Now, can he seal the deal on the recruiting trail? That remains to be determined. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we're going to flip over and talk some BYU football. This past weekend, over-under win totals kind of rose back to the forefront for BYU football. And yeah, I know the number's low, but is it completely out of the realm of possibility that BYU could not go over 4.5, according to most sports books out there? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is here for you guys when you're trying to hire for your small business. You want to find quality professionals that are right for the role you're hiring for. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team, and more importantly, they do it faster and for free. It's not just a job board. Speaking of LinkedIn, LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70%, and you heard that, 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. The best part is LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing many hats, might not have the adequate time and resources to hire, and they're constantly finding new ways to make that process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write the job descriptions, making the process that much easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn Jobs for their hiring. Why aren't you? So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post that job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day and having to turn on that volume with all the shouting going on the Embrace Debate networks? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports today, my friends. Is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories about all the screaming going on the other networks. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube and also on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right. So some reports emerged as we get closer and closer to college football season. I think we're 111 days away from BYU kicking things off against Southern Illinois. It might be 110, but regardless, it's getting closer and closer, and you're starting to see more and more win totals coming out for BYU and other college football programs looking ahead to year 2 in the Big 12 for Brigham Young University. Now, our friends at FanDuel, who are our official sponsor here, by the way, go to go to FanDuel.com/lockedoncollege to check out what all they got to offer for you guys. Just a shameless little plug there. They have BYU as most of the stuff over the weekend, similar to it, have BYU as an over-under win total of 4.5 this season. Now, I saw some righteous indignation from some BYU fans, and how can these people think that BYU is going to be that bad? Well, let's be real. They finished 5-7 a year ago. So they were essentially, if you were at 4.5 a year ago, you would have gotten the over just barely for BYU. And they did it in the first 7 games of the season. They were 5-2 and then ended the season on a 5-game slide. I think all the questions about BYU are absolutely valid right now, and it's a big reason why I think that the sports books, including FanDuel, are pegging BYU's over-under win total at 4.5. Is that out of the realm of possibility that BYU could go bowling? No, it's absolutely not. Had BYU not had that awful 100-yard pick six against Oklahoma, they probably score a touchdown there. It's a very decent chance they end up beating Oklahoma at home. And then also, the ball bounces another way against Oklahoma State. It's not a fumble at the end of that double overtime period. And BYU could have found themselves, instead of sitting at 5-7, 7-5 and playing in the postseason. It's crazy how quickly perceptions of seasons can change, literally with how the ball bounces. It's a weirdly shaped ball and it bounces weird ways, and it absolutely can hurt or help you the way it bounces. And that's the way BYU learned last season. There were games BYU absolutely got boat raced in. I think I can point directly to the West Virginia game, for example, as one that BYU they didn't show up and they got absolutely throttled in that game. I think the Cougars have learned a lot of lessons year 1 in the Big 12, and they are better prepared going into year 2 here in the Big 12 than they were in year 1. But the question that remains, I think in most odds makers' eyes, is who in the world is playing quarterback for BYU, and are any of them really that good? That is the question that I think every one of these odds makers is asking themselves. Now, some of you may be in team Jake Retzlaff. He's going to improve. He has 4 games under his belt. Now he's finally in full control of this offense. He understands it. He threw 0 interceptions in spring ball, Jay. I get all that. Now, the other thing is Gary Bohannon has got a bona fide resume when he's healthy of being a guy who led a Baylor program to a Big 12 title and a Sugar Bowl berth. There are no other quarterbacks on BYU's roster that can argue that their resume surpasses his. Then you also have wild cards like a Trayson Bourget, who had a number of starts last year at Western Michigan, and then the ultimate wild card, the recent addition to the BYU football roster, in McKay Hillstead. I can tell you, having watched with my own eyes, McKay Hillstead, when he is 100% healthy, he is as dynamic an athlete that BYU has had at quarterback, and that includes Jaron Hall, Zach Wilson in the recent past. He is athletic, if not more athletic than any of those guys. I will argue till the cows come home with you on that point. The question is, A, is he 100% healthy? And B, can he stay healthy at 5'10", $190? That's the big question mark about him. I think the reason why BYU's over-under win total is 4.5 is because there is just nobody out there who expects much out of BYU's quarterback position. And as we talk often on this podcast, those of you who are everydayers, we talk all the time that BYU's fortunes, more so than a lot of college football programs, rest on the shoulders of their quarterbacks. When BYU has a very good quarterback, traditionally they're actually a pretty darn good football program. History suggests that. You look at the great quarterbacks in BYU's pantheon, and when they have been at the helm, BYU has risen to some of the highest heights they've ever had, none more so than the 1984 national championship season. When they haven't had that quarterback, seasons like 2017, I don't mean to dredge up awful memories, but that one is seared in my head, that if you have questions at the quarterback position, you start playing quarterback roulette due to injury and other factors, it absolutely can doom you to a otherwise pathetic season. So that is why there is a major question mark looming over this BYU football program. My goal, and let me also add this, the other issue at play here is BYU's year 2 Big 12 schedule is far tougher than it was in year 1. BYU's playing the who's who, seemingly, if you essentially dole out who the top teams in the Big 12 are expected to be this season. BYU faces all of them, it feels like. So that's the major question facing BYU right now is, can you go up against the big dogs, quote unquote, in the Big 12, hang with them, and then grind out some victories? I'm going to say it once. I'm going to say it again. I still believe a 6-6 record for BYU should be the goal this season. The only reason I say that, because I know that it irks some of you out there when I say it, because trust me, I have conversations with y'all about it. The reason why I say 6-6 would be a success this season is it proves BYU, A, is on an upward trajectory because they would have improved from a 5-7 season, and B, they're back in the postseason and they can start to show incremental progress. Now, for those of you who are naysayers, who believe that Kalani's not cut out for this job, you think A-Rod's asleep at the wheel for the BYU offense, I don't have many good answers for you other than those guys understand what they're up against. There's a reason why they're in coaching. They understand the pitfalls, the pressure. They understand everything that goes with the job that they have inherited and they've aspired to have, and what they have currently at Brigham Young University. They understand what they are going to be facing in terms if they go a second season without a bowl berth and a postseason appearance. Yeah, there are going to be more heads that roll this season, and they understand that. I think BYU is completely understanding of where they stand right now in the Big 12. I believe BYU can surpass 4.5 wins, but if that quarterback position does not settle itself and you don't find somebody who can essentially take the bull by the horns and be the guy for BYU at quarterback and lead them through this Big 12 schedule, that is why I believe BYU is very much a candidate to sit at that 4.5 mark, maybe be a 4-8 team and not surpass the over-under win total. My goal, once again, 6 wins. Show improvement and continue to build this thing. And it's going to take some time for BYU to be an upper echelon Big 12 team in football. I know that basketball may have skewed your mindset saying, well, if Mark Pope can have this team that was 13th in the preseason poll finish 5th, why can't BYU football be a surprise team? I'm not saying they can't. I'm just not banking on it personally. If you believe that, if you want to put your money down on BYU winning 8 or 9 wins and absolutely being in the mix at the top end of the Big 12, good on you. You've got far more faith than I do. But until BYU settles that quarterback position and figures out exactly who the guy is, and that guy can prove that he can be a difference maker, get the ball to the playmakers that BYU has on offense, count me a little bit of it as a doubter right now for BYU. So I remain sitting on that fence right now. Get to 6 wins. Show me incremental progress and continue to build this thing the right way with the building blocks that BYU has been known for. Solid offensive and defensive line play, an outstanding running back and a rushing attack that is going to be able to take the pressure off the quarterbacks for BYU, and improved defensive play overall under Jay Hill. Those are all keys to BYU getting back over the hump. And we'll see if 2024 yields better results than 2023 did. But I can completely understand why you are upset about BYU's over and win total being a little bit low, probably in your eyes. But understand why these bookmakers are doing it, because they have massive, massive questions about this BYU football program. And until they answer those questions, the questions will remain. All right, we'll finish up today's show with a couple of notes on where some former BYU football players have landed, also basketball players, and also a postseason-less appearance for the third straight year for BYU softball. What in the world is going on for a program that at one point made 17 straight NCAA regionals? We'll talk about all that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys to have fun this postseason. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL playoffs, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home the big win that you want of your own. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Like I said, BYU over at FanDuel, the football program, the over-under number right now is 4.5 wins. You get some pretty good odds, by the way, if you take the over for BYU right now with our friends at FanDuel. I think I saw it when I was recording the podcast at plus 104. So if you want to rake in some cash, put some money on that and let it ride this season. But no matter what, visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. So let's think about it this way. You put $5 on one of these NBA or NHL playoff games, you win that $5, take that $150 and put it on the over-under on BYU football. Have some fun this postseason and cash it in with our friends at FanDuel. Once again, visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for being with us. By the way, if you've not done so already, please sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a great way to get interaction with myself in the form of a text message. I can send you messages. You can send them right back. You can go back and forth on a number of topics you want to weigh in on today's show. Well, guess what? Join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a 14-day free trial. $5 a month afterwards, and you'll get all my insight that I have during the day when I haven't had a chance to record the next day's podcast. There's a lot of news that breaks, and we're getting live reaction from you as well as myself on our Insiders group. And if you haven't signed up already, click the link in the show notes, whether you're watching and or listening to this in the show notes below. Click that link, sign up today, and join us over there. All right, first things first, congratulations to Cale Breslin. There were strong indications that he was going to commit to BYU, and he did that on Friday. Very, very solid running back. And the nice part was, I mentioned that last week when I talked about him, he was rated as an 83 in the 24/7 sports rating system as a 3-star prospect. Well, for whatever reason, he got a nice bump. He's now rated 86, and that's actually a very nice bump. That puts him as an upper echelon 3-star prospect for BYU. And the more I watch his film, the more I really like what this guy can do. Now, I didn't know this connection. I probably should have put it together earlier. His head coach at the college level at Faith Lutheran High School is Mike Sanford Jr. Now, Mike Sanford Jr., for those of you who may not be aware, has coached in the college ranks for many, many years, but he's been coaching at the high school level for Faith Lutheran for quite a while right now. But Cale Breslin now becomes the 4th commitment of the 2025 class for BYU. And I think that this is a solid pickup for the BYU running back position. I think Cale still has, in terms of some development, in terms of speed and strength combo at 5'11", 190, but his vision and his you watch his film and the way he allows his blocks to get set up before attacking, it is something you absolutely can work with in this zone scheme that BYU likes to have. He picked BYU over offers from the likes of Wisconsin, Indiana, and Syracuse amongst the Power 4, as well as UConn, San Diego State. So, nice pickup for BYU, honestly. So congratulations to Cale Breslin on picking BYU. Also, congratulations to former BYU quarterback Ryder Burton. He is headed across the Big 12. He's staying in the conference. He is committed to West Virginia University. Yes, he will be a Mountaineer, so congratulations to Ryder. He makes the cross-country trek to Morgantown, trading the Wasatch for the Appalachians, and he said this, something about the hills, committed on social media. And Ryder is a guy that I think was just a bit of a fish out of water in BYU's offense. What I mean by that is he was more of a quarterback in an offense that needed an athlete versus you get what I'm saying. He's more of a Keaton Slovis than he was a Jaron Hall. And that's nothing against Ryder. Trust me. He was a very, very solid football player. I think that the offense just did not fit his skill set for BYU, and he decided he needed to make a decision for himself, and now he ends up at West Virginia. Wish him nothing but the best after he heads to WVU after just one season in Provo, coming out of Springville High School. He was one of those guys that was hoping that his athleticism would shine through, but it just really kind of never came to fruition. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, he was as big a proponent of BYU football as any prospect in recent memory. And just it's crazy things happen, folks. So wish him the best as he moves forward here. Now, the final note I got for you guys on today's show, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart, is because my wife was a former BYU softball player, is that for the third straight year, the BYU softball program is going to miss out on the NCAA tournament. Now, last year they played in what is essentially a newfangled NIT type of tournament for teams that miss out on the NCAA regionals. But BYU finishes the season 31-23 overall, 12-16 in the Big 12 in their first season in the conference. So pretty solid campaign overall, I thought, for Gordon Eakin's squad, but they just miss out. There were some people out there saying BYU got snubbed. I didn't think they were necessarily as on the bubble as some people might have thought. I know that win over Oklahoma State in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament was a huge win for them, but then they went out and order got restored, so to say, as they got trounced by Oklahoma in the semifinals. 5 other Big 12 teams did make it. UCF, who was essentially kind of in the same territory as BYU RPI-wise, did make the field, but it's unfortunate. And Gordon Eakin, like I said, has been a very, very successful coach for a long time at BYU. They had a run of 17 straight NCAA regionals made. My wife, her entire career at BYU, the postseason was just, it was not a question of if, it was a question of where are we going to be playing at. But it's crazy to consider that after those 17 straight appearances, it has now been 3 straight postseasons without an NCAA regional appearance. Now, they were beset with some injuries to their pitching staff for BYU softball. So all things considered, was actually a pretty marvelous season for the Cougars. Now, can you take the next step next year in the Big 12 and make it back to the NCAA regional? That's the big question mark that remains for BYU softball. But we'll see what happens. I look forward to tracking it. It's obviously, like I said, it's near and dear to my heart because my wife played for that program, and she's got obviously still an affinity for it. And then also a couple other notes for you guys from the BYU side of things. Wanted to also mention that the BYU baseball program, they will finish up their season this weekend on the road. They're headed to Kansas State, if I recall correctly. Now, postseason for them is out of the question at this point. They are now, what are they sitting? 6-21 in the conference. So just not been the season that BYU baseball wanted to have. They're 19-29 overall. They've had a lot of success in state, but when they've played in conference games, it's been a really tough run for them. They were swept this past weekend by Cincinnati, losing 9-5, 4-2, and 12-5. They'll play their final home game of the season tomorrow when they take on Grand Canyon at Miller Park. And then this weekend, they're at Kansas State for the final 3-game set of Big 12 play. So we'll see how things round out here, but tough season for BYU baseball, and all the tougher, obviously, with senior weekend being swept at the hands of a fellow newcomer to the Big 12 conference. All right, so there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Monday edition of the show. We will be back tomorrow talking all things BYU sports. Maybe we got some good news on the basketball front. A staff member's hired. They signed one of these 2, whether it's Berke or Maxim Logue. We'll see what happens. But I think that BYU basketball is doing some really, really cool things, and we'll continue to track it all. Also talk all things BYU football as well. So stay with us every single day right here on Locked On Cougars. And once again, thank you for making it your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you who are everydayers. And until tomorrow, my friends, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.